So without further ado, I want to introduce Dr. Reza Shah Kazemi, someone who is known to many of us as one of the great contributors to the expansion of knowledge of Islamic studies, and particularly the history of Shiism, and particularly the person and legacy of Imam Ali alayhi salam. Dr. Reza Shah Kazemi is author in the field of Islamic studies and comparative religion, and he is Senior Research Associate at the Institute for Ismaili Studies and Managing Editor of the Encyclopedia Islamica. That source, by the way, is absolutely crucial for those of us that work in Islamic studies. The access to knowledge that Reza has overseen by making that available in English is quite remarkable. And when I use it, I always think of the contribution of Reza and his team, because it is not a small task to translate an encyclopedia of that size, and it's an ongoing task, and long may it continue. He studied international relations and politics at Sussex and at Exeter University, so we are honoured to count him as one of our graduates and alumni. And he obtained his PhD in comparative religion from the University of Kent. He will be talking today about Nothing But Beauty, Hazrat Zainab and the Meaning of Bearing Witness. And Reza, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Robert. Since I've only got 45 minutes to speak, I'm going to go straight into this presentation, and to do so by saying that whereas on previous occasions I've always been painfully aware of my lack of qualification to speak about the Ahlul Bayt and their exalted spiritual perspectives and their even more sublime spiritual realizations. On this occasion, I feel particularly shamed by the implicit presumption of speaking about Sayyidina Zainab alayhi salam, for reasons that will become apparent in the course of the presentation. So suffice to say, as a kind of disclaimer, that I'm offering this presentation as a tribute to Hazrat Zainab and to the Ahlul Bayt, and requesting from them their intercession for this Abd Munib, this repentant sinner. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Imagine the scene. Hazrat Zainab, the granddaughter of the Prophet, the sister of Imam Hussein and Imam Hassan, the daughter of Imam Ali and Hazrat Fatima, is brought in chains from Karbala to Kufa after having witnessed the slaughter of her brother and 72 members of her family and the closest companions of the Ahlul Bayt. The severed head of her brother and the other martyrs are on spears, being held aloft in contemptuous, triumphant procession. The governor of Kufa, Ibn Ziyad, who had ordered the killing of Imam Hussein, in accordance with the command from the Caliph Yazid, asks Zainab, with what one imagines would have been a sneering sarcasm, what do you think about what God has done to the people of your house? Her shattering reply has thundered down through the centuries as one of the most magnificent and mysterious of all utterances in the annals of human history. I saw nothing but beauty, she said. Ma ra'aytu illa jamila. In this lecture, I'll try to explore some of the meanings encapsulated in this veritably koan-like statement, with a focus on the principle of shahada, meaning both bearing witness and martyrdom. Doing so in the light of the metaphysics of beauty implicit in Hazrat Zainab's inspired dictum. The first thing to say is that her statement is much more than simply the courageous response of a captive woman speaking truth to power. A woman who is outwardly powerless, but inwardly fearless. A woman whose spirit is indomitable because her faith is unshakable. It certainly was all these things, but it was also something infinitely more. Her vision of beauty allows us to intuitively glimpse her exalted spiritual station and that of her brother and the martyrs of Karbala. This station is one which is scarcely imaginable for ordinary human beings, blinkered as we are by horizontal or purely worldly modes of thinking and being. For Zainab, the existential experience of a despicable atrocity was eclipsed by a spiritual vision of invincible beauty. The beauty of the return to God. A return expressed in the Quran as follows: truly we belong to God, and truly we are ever returning unto Him. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. It's important to place this famous formula uttered by Muslims when they hear of death, to place this in context, for it relates to our theme in a very direct way. The Quranic passage begins with an exhortation to the believers to seek help from God in patience and prayer, and adds, God is truly with the patient. Inna Allaha ma'as sabirin. Then it proceeds, do not say that those who are slain in the path of God are dead. Nay, they are alive, but you perceive not. And we shall indeed try you with fear and hunger and loss of worldly goods, of lives and of fruits. But give good tidings unto those who are patient. Those who, when calamity befalls them, say, truly we belong to God, and truly we are ever returning unto Him. Upon them descend blessings from their Lord and mercy, and they are rightly guided. This is a very revealing passage as regards the meaning of sabr. It's far from mere patience or steadfastness. Rather, sabr is an attitude which enables one to view every conceivable calamity as a trial from God, and to respond accordingly with unconditional resignation, tempered with the inner peace that comes to the heart from the certainty that such resignation prepares one for the meeting with the Lord at death. This, perhaps, is what the prophet Jacob, Sayyidina Yaqub alayhi salam, meant when he referred to beautiful patience, sabrun jamil, as his response to being deprived of his beloved son, Joseph, Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam. It would seem self-evident that Hazrat Zainab witnessed the spiritual beauty that emanates from the sabr manifested by her brother and the martyrs of Karbala. Patience is one of the beautiful virtues manifested at Karbala. One can assert confidently that Hazrat Zainab witnessed the stunning display of the full spectrum of virtues, starting with beautiful patience and self-sacrifice, implacable justice, heroic courage, extending to steadfast perseverance, adamantine fortitude, majestic dignity, unsurpassable magnanimity, and so on. All of these virtues being summed up in the idea of futuwa, which we might translate as spiritual chivalry. The fatah, the spiritual knight, is one for whom living according to the highest ideals goes hand in hand with being prepared to die for the sake of those same ideals. La fata illa Ali. The Prophet said, no chivalric knight but Ali, alayhi salam. The true fata knows viscerally that this world is but a dream, and that the hereafter is awakening from that dream. All of us as believers have some degree of conviction of this truth, but our theoretical understanding is only a faint foreshadowing of the spiritual vision of the hereafter enjoyed by the martyrs of Karbala and by Hazrat Zainab. Such a spiritual vision, viewed by the eye of the Spirit, is bestowed as a gift of grace upon a heart which is perpetually pulsating with the reality of the hereafter. The reality expressed by such Quranic verses as the following. The life of this world is naught but sport and play, and the abode of the hereafter, that is indeed true life, if only they knew. And the hereafter is better and more lasting. Hazrat Zainab saw nothing but beauty in the return of her brother and his companions to their true home on high. It was not that she was denying either the appalling nature of the massacre or the monstrous scale of the injustice. Rather, these terrestrial dimensions were overshadowed by celestial ascensions. She bore witness not so much to the destruction of the martyrs, but to their liberation, not the defeat of their cause, but the triumph of their spirits, the supreme triumph, Fawz al-Azim, constituted by their glorious entrance into paradise. Jalaluddin Rumi makes the nature of this vision of spiritual liberation crystal clear in his counterpoint to the excessive lamentation of the Shi'is of Aleppo for the martyred Imam Hussein. He says in the Masnavi, a royal spirit escaped from a prison. Why should we rend our garments, and how should we gnaw our hands? Since they were monarchs of the religion, it was the hour of joy when they broke their bonds. They sped towards the pavilion of empire. They cast off their fetters and their chains. It is the day of kingship and pride and sovereignty. In your countenance, where is the happiness of the wine of faith? Hazrat Zainab's countenance indeed glowed with the happiness of the wine of faith. She bore witness to the reality of paradise, which transcends the illusions of this world, however horrific be the physical manifestations of those illusions. Even the most appalling of all atrocities in this world. And what can be more appalling, more vicious, more absurd than the slaughter of the Prophet's grandson and his family and companions by an army of so-called Muslims? Even the most appalling atrocities in this world are rendered illusory by the fulgurating light of the beatific realities of paradise. Similarly, Hazrat Zainab witnessed the beauty of the souls of the martyrs entering the beautiful abode of the hereafter, Dar al-Akhirah. Their most beautiful traits of character, Makarim al-Akhlaq, reflected and participated in the beauty of God and bore witness to the success of the prophetic mission, according to the following three hadiths. First, تَخَلَّقُوا بِأَخْلَاقِ اللَّهِ, assume the character traits of God. Second, God is beautiful and He loves beauty. إِنَّ اللَّهَ جَمِيلٌ وَيُحِبُّ الْجَمَالِ. And finally, I was only raised up as a prophet in order to make perfect the most noble traits of character. إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. Imam Zain al-Abidin, the sole male adult survivor of the massacre, wrote a treatise with this title. And in reading this treatise, we can witness for ourselves the beauty, not just of the most noble character traits manifested to perfection at Karbala, but also the beauty of the religion of Islam per se. Because the reason for the existence of Islam, its very raison d'être, according to the Prophet, is the establishment and perfection of these character traits. The implication here is that these noble traits of character should not just be regarded as human virtues, but as so many spiritual qualities of the soul, beautiful qualities which reflect and radiate the Asma al-Husna, the most beautiful names of God. In her brother, Hazrat Zainab was witnessing the beauty of Al-Insan al-Kamil, the perfect human being, who manifested the divine qualities in all circumstances. In telling us that she witnessed nothing but beauty, Hazrat Zainab is bearing witness to the Imam's own vision of the unalterable beauty of God, even in the midst of the most gut-wrenching suffering. So both of them, Hazrat Zainab and Imam Hussein alayhim as-salam, both of them can be regarded as having attained the highest spiritual station, that of walaya, sanctity. One of the implications of walaya pertinent to our discussion is made clear by Abdul Razak Kashani, author of one of the most important esoteric commentaries of the Quran. In his exegesis of the Surah Al-Insan, a surah alluding in verses 6 to 10 to the vow, the nadhr, of fasting for 3 consecutive days taken by the Imam and Hazrat Fatima alayhim as-salam for the sake of the healing of their 2 sons, Imams Hassan and Hussein alayhim as-salam. In the surah, a distinction is made between pious believers, the abrar, on the one hand, and the slaves of God, the ibadullah, on the other. The slaves of God here are implying the Ahlul Bayt, whereas the pious drink from a cup flavoured with the wine of the fountain of Kafur, the slaves of God, the Ahlul Bayt, drink directly from the fountain. And the more they drink, the more copiously the fountain flows. يُفَجِّرُونَهَا تَفْجِيرًا. We'll return to this image, inshallah, at the end of this lecture. Kashani's description of the slaves of God is very revealing for our purposes. He says that these slaves do not distinguish between the crushing power, the qahar, and the loving kindness of God, the lutf, between pity and harshness, trial, destitution, and prosperity. Instead, their love of God remains unaltered in the face of all opposites. And, quote, their delights continue amid graces, and na'ama, and afflictions, ar-sarra, mercy, ar-rahma, and oppression, az-zahma. By contrast, the pious, the abrar, love the giver of grace, al-mun'im, and the loving kind, al-latif, and the merciful, al-rahim. But at the manifestation of the all-crushing power of al-qahar, and the one who puts you to the test, al-mubli, and the avenger, al-muntaqim, their love vanishes and their delight changes to revulsion. Hazrat Zainab saw the beauty of the martyrs abiding in delight, even amid the appalling calamities being inflicted upon them. And she herself could only have seen this beauty if her own heart were penetrated by the same spiritual delight emanating from certainty of the hereafter. Turning now to another aspect of the beauty witnessed by Hazrat Zainab, the beauty of divine providence. Her discourses at the courts of Ibn Ziyad and Yazid are a good starting point. In these orations, Hazrat Zainab gives us the premises of a theodicy, that is, a means of justifying the ways of God, reconciling his omnipotence with his goodness. One of the most difficult theological questions is the following. If everything that happens is in accordance with the will of God, how does one explain the existence of evil, suffering, and injustice? Is God omnipotent and therefore evil, or is he good but impotent? In her exchanges with Ibn Ziyad and Yazid, these philosophical problems are implicitly addressed and resolved. First, as regards Ibn Ziyad, he says to Hazrat Zainab, "Praise be to God who has disgraced you," in the plural, "and killed you, your people, and has given a lie to your fables." Zainab replies, "Praise be to God who has honoured us with Muhammad and has cleansed us with an utter purification." Tathiran. Instead, God disgraces the dissolute, she says, and gives the lie to the deviant. Ibn Ziyad understands well the allusion to the Prophet's household, the Ahlul Bayt, in the word Tathiran, since the verse of Tathir, verse 33 of the Surah Al-Ahzab, begins by addressing the Ahlul Bayt, "O ye people of the house." So he knows, and he proceeds to ask her, what does she think of what God has done with you people, you at the Ahlul Bayt? Here, the theological implication is that God, being both omnipotent and just, has dealt appropriately with those who rebelled against the legitimate Muslim authorities, the Umayyad Caliphate. Hazrat Zainab replies, "To be killed was prescribed for them, it was written for them. And they have gone forth to the places where they were to lie. God will bring you and them together, and you will be summoned by them before him." In other words, according to Hazrat Zainab, the slaying of Zainab's brother and his closest relatives and supporters was indeed prescribed by God, but this divine decree, this qada, predetermined measuring out the qadar of all things, this divine decree does not contradict the justice of the cause of her brother, nor does it justify the killing of her brother. Rather, both the justice of his cause and the injustice of his being killed were willed by God as part of a providential plan whose pure goodness will be revealed in all its plenitude only in the hereafter. A vision of this glorious fulfillment of the divine plan is given here below to the hearts of the saints, since according to Hazrat Zainab's father Imam Ali, the hearts of the saints are already in paradise, only their bodies are at work in this world. So the heart of Hazrat Zainab could already see in this world, even amid the massacre of Karbala, the beauty of the fulfillment of God's plan in the hereafter. Contemplation of paradisal finality yields the most convincing of all theodicies. If we look at Hazrat Zainab's discourse at the court of Yazid in Damascus, her theodicy becomes clearer. Yazid recites pagan poetry while poking a cane at the head of Imam Hussein and saying contemptuously how white his teeth are. Hazrat Zainab steps forward fearlessly and delivers her memorable address, beginning by reciting verse 10 of the Surah Ar-Rum, which refers to evildoers who deny God's signs and ridicule them. And then she asks rhetorically, "Do you suppose, Yazid, having cut us off so that we have ended up in chains before you, herded before you, that you have power over us, and that for us there is ignominy from God, while for you there is nobility and favour from him? She proceeds to decry his delusions of grandeur, citing verse 178 of Surah Al-Imran, "Let not the disbelievers think that the free rein, the indulgence we give them, is good for their souls. We only give them free rein that they may grow in sinfulness, and theirs will be a shameful judgment, a shameful punishment." She cites and paraphrases several other Quranic verses in the course of her speech, and we can summarize her theodicy as follows. To the extent that one has absolute faith in God, the result will be unswerving trust in the essential goodness of the divine reality, and therefore certitude in the ultimate goodness of everything, absolutely everything, willed by God. This trust will in turn attune the consciousness of the heart, an awareness transcending the purely conceptual plane. It will attune the consciousness of the heart to the unimaginable, celestial modalities by which all apparent injustices on earth will be rectified. The intuition of this cosmic restitution on the day of judgment enables one to see with the heart the miraculous ways in which all terrestrial dissonances dissolve within an exquisitely beautiful pattern of unimpeachable justice. The beatific consummation of the plan of providence might then be discerned through the veil of each and every phenomenon in existence. Everything, each of these veils, has its own part to play, however infinitesimal, in the infinitely complex matrix of interweaving chains of imperceptible causality within which the divine plan unfolds. If we look briefly at certain narrations of Imams Ja'far as-Sadiq and Muhammad al-Baqir alayhim as-salam, in their response to questions concerning the reason for the massacre of Sayyidina Hussein and his companions at Karbala, these narrations will help shed light on the meaning of Hazrat Zainab's vision of beauty. The thrust of their responses was that Imam Hussein and his companions were killed unjustly, but nonetheless in accordance with the will of God. In one of his responses, Imam al-Baqir is reported as making a very important theological statement regarding the injustice of the slaying of Imams Ali, Hassan and Hussein alayhim as-salam. Imam al-Baqir said, God had foreordained that, meaning their cruel deaths, and had determined it. He had decreed it and had enjoined it. Then he put it into effect. So by a prior knowledge of this from the messenger of God to them, Ali, Al-Hassan and Al-Hussein rose up. The narration continues to the effect that had these three sought God's protection against the calamities afflicting them, God would have responded to their prayers and saved them from those calamities. But on account of their knowledge that their being killed unjustly was part of God's inscrutable plan of salvation for the Muslim community, they did not seek to avoid their destiny. The narration concludes with the paradoxical statement that the apparent defeats suffered by the three Imams were in reality spiritual stations, manazil, so many marks of honor from God which he desired that they attain. That's a quotation from Imam al-Baqir. One cannot fail to be reminded here of the way in which the Christ, Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, according to the Gospel of St. John, prophesies his martyrdom. As soon as Judas leaves the gathering at the Last Supper, Jesus says, "Now the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified in him." Far from being depicted as a victory for the powers of the world over Jesus, his martyrdom is proclaimed as a glorification of God. Hence, one can well imagine that the Blessed Virgin, Hazrat Maryam alayhi salam, could also say, when asked what she witnessed at the foot of the cross, "I saw nothing but beauty." Likewise, we can see in these words of Jesus from the Gospel of Matthew an allusion to the crucial distinction between viewing phenomena from a human point of view as opposed to the divine point of view. A distinction which goes to the heart of Hazrat Zainab's vision of beauty at Karbala. From that time, Jesus began to show to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and be raised the third day. Then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, "Far be it from you, Lord. This shall not happen to you." But Jesus turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are an offense to me. For you are not mindful of the things of God, but the things of men." It's the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 16, verses 21 to 23. Hazrat Zainab's vision of Karbala demonstrates that she was absolutely mindful of the things of God. Whereas those who see in Karbala nothing but suffering and injustice are mindful only of the things of men. Turning finally to what one might call the angelic dimensions of the beauty witnessed by Hazrat Zainab, I would venture this speculation. She witnessed the angelic presences, energies, auras, which were irresistibly drawn to the souls of the martyrs, shedding their mortal frames and ascending to heaven as immortal spirits. Their spirits themselves having become akin to angels. This idea is based on the following verses. "Verily those who say, 'Our Lord is God,' and who then follow straight his path, on them descend the angels. تَتَنَزَّلُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ, saying, 'Fear not, nor grieve, but receive the good tidings of the paradise which ye are promised. We are your protecting friends. نَحْنُ أَوْلِيَاؤُكُمْ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ. We are your protecting friends in the life of this world and the hereafter, wherein you will be given that which your souls long for and that which you pray for." This was the translation of Dr. Martin Ling's Sheikh Abu Bakr Sirajuddin radiallahu anhu wa anna bih. I believe that Hazrat Zainab witnessed this descent of the angels, this tanazzul, and witnessed the beauty of the paradise promised by the angels to the martyrs, who were gloriously bearing witness to the Lordship of God and heroically, quote, following straight his path, ثُمَّ اسْتَقَامُوا, as Dr. Lings has translated that phrase. The latent angelic dimension of their attestation, in conjunction with perfect virtue, is made clear in the following verse. "Truly God bears witness that there is no God but He, as do His angels and the sages, those who are upright in justice. شهد الله أنه لا إله إلا هو والملائكة وأولو العلم قائما بالقسط." Those who rise up in justice to affirm the oneness of God are participating in a testimony whose substance is essentially angelic and ultimately divine. Both God and the angels are making this testimony, just as both God and the angels invoke blessings on the Prophet. "Truly God and his angels invoke blessings upon the Prophet. O you who believe, invoke blessings upon him and give him greetings of peace." Inna Allaha wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi. The Prophet has told us how this blessing is to be done, by invoking blessings upon him and his family. Appreciating the angelic essence of witnessing divine unity and the angelic essence of invoking blessings on the Prophet helps us to deepen our intuition of the meaning of several sayings of the Imams, to the effect that they are the mukhtalaf al-malaika, the frequenting place of the angels. Imam Hussein himself mentions this extraordinary prerogative of the Ahlul Bayt in the discourse which, as it were, inaugurates Karbala. His response to the demand from Yazid's governor in Medina, Al-Walid bin Utbah, to proffer his oath of allegiance to Yazid. O Amir, the Imam says, we are the Ahlul Bayt of prophethood, the treasury of the message, and the frequenting place of the angels. Mukhtalaf al-Malaika, and the place upon which divine mercy descends, Mahbat al-Rahmah. This image reminds us of the vision of Sayyidina Yaqub, Jacob, the prophet Jacob, known in the Christian tradition as the ladder of Jacob. He saw angels descending and ascending this ladder from heaven to earth. This image is a perfect evocation of the channels of grace by which the whole cosmos is maintained, in accordance with the verse of Surah An-Nazi'at, which refers to Al-Mudabbirati Amran, those angels who manage or govern all of the affairs of the cosmos. In similar vein, Imam Hussein said, let the believer yearn for the meeting with his Lord in truth, for I see in death nothing but felicity, sa'ada. This statement by the Imam can be read as the fulfillment of the prophecy made by his father, Imam Ali, some 20 years earlier, when hearing the name of Karbala called out by the crier as he and his army were marching past it. Imam Ali said, this is the plain of the lovers and the witnesses, the ushaq and the shuhada. This statement of Imam Ali takes us to the very heart of the beauty witnessed by his daughter. The lover bears witness to the beloved, first and foremost by means of worship in all its forms, from the canonical prayer as-salat to supplication, dua, recitation of the Quran, and invocation of the divine name. Here we need to remind ourselves that the scale, the intensity, and the depth of the worship performed by the Ahlul Bayt is scarcely imaginable to us. As William Chittick tells us in his magnificent translation of the Sahifa Sajjadiyah, which is on sale, I think, from Muhammadi Trust outside, is that right? Yes. William Chittick says, it is related that Imam Zain al-Abidin used to perform 1,000 supererogatory cycles of salat every night, in conscious emulation of the custom of his grandfather, Ali. We can get some idea of what is taking place in this kind of worship, going back to the prophetic sunnah of devoting 8 hours each day to prayer, by considering the following esoteric saying of Imam Ali. Truly God has a drink for his friends, awliya'ihi. When they drink it, they are intoxicated, stakaru. When they are intoxicated, they are enraptured, tarabu. When they are enraptured, they are blessed, tabu. And when they are blessed, they dissolve, dhabu. And when they dissolve, they are free, khalasu. And when they are free, they devote themselves purely, akhlasu. And when they devote themselves purely, they seek, talabu. And when they seek, they find, wajadu. And when they find, they arrive, wasalu. And when they arrive, they are at one, ittasalu. There is no difference between them and their beloved. When the Ahlul Bayt pray, therefore, they are imbibing these wines springing from the fountains and rivers of paradise. This image takes us back to Kashani's commentary on the Surat al-Insan. The Ahl al-Bayt caused the flow of the fountain of Kafur to gush forth even more copiously as they drink from it, because, to quote Kashani, they are themselves the source of this spring. There is no duality, no otherness. Were it otherwise, it would not be the fountain of Kafur, because of the darkness of the veil of egoity, egocentricity, anaiya, and duality. The removal of the veil of the ego, anaiya, is brought about by prayer in all its forms, but most effectively by the remembrance of God. The spiritual reality, the haqiqah of this practice, is expressed by Imam Ali as follows. You will not attain the haqiqah, the spiritual reality of the dhikr, until you forget yourself in your remembrance. Hatta tansa nafsaka fi dhikrika. Herein lies the essence of slavehood, the complete loss of selfhood, attained through the remembrance of God. And this selflessness renders the saints identical to the paradisal sources of grace. The blessings symbolized by the fountain of Kafur flow through them. They have themselves paradoxically become selfless channels of divine grace, cascading down from heaven to earth. In the words of Imam Ali, down from me torrents do pour, up to me no bird can soar. When Hazrat Zainab witnessed her brother performing the Dhuhr prayer in the thick of battle on the day of Ashura, two of his companions losing their lives while shielding their Imam from the rain of arrows, we have no doubt that she saw nothing but beauty. The beauty of the torrent of graces cascading down to earth from heaven, and the glorious ascent of angelic graces up to heaven. What she witnessed was lovers returning to their divine beloved, saturated with the joy of the good news, the bushra, that is given by the angels to the friends of God. Truly, this is from the Quran, the Surah Yunus. Truly the friends of God have no fear, neither do they grieve. Those who believe and were ever conscious of God. For them is the good news in the life of this world and in the hereafter. There is no changing the words of God. That is the supreme triumph. ألا إن أولياء الله لا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون الذين آمنوا وكانوا يتقون لهم البشرى في الحياة الدنيا وفي الآخرة لا تبديل لكلمات الله ذلك هو الفوز العظيم. In other words, Hazrat Zainab witnessed the spiritual reality of these angelic souls being summoned back to God, according to the final verses of the Surah Al-Fajr. O thou soul which art at peace, return unto thy Lord with gladness that is thine in him and his in thee. Enter thou among my slaves, enter thou my paradise. يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي. Thank you for your attention.